vlog again. Just can't wait to do a vlog again. The life I love is making vlogs for my friends, and I can't wait to do a vlog again. Doing a vlog again. Going places that I've never been. Seeing things that I may never see again. And I can't wait to do a vlog again. Hello everyone and welcome back to The Top Vloggers. As always, I am High and Mighty Joe, hanging out with
the lovely Cat.
And we have got a great vlog for you today. We are headed to the Rotary Jail Museum. It is a former jail that is now a museum, and apparently it still rotates. We'll see if it's rotating when we get there. That is a spinning domino sign. Something you don't see every day. We are outside the Montgomery County Rotary Jail Museum. I think we're going to go inside and take a look.
As I said, my name is Angie. I've been here just a year, and I'm going to be your tour guide today. We're going to take a tour through the house, and then we make our way back to the jail. So if at any time you have questions, let me know. I always tell people this is your tour. I do this every day, so the more you're interested in, the more I can try to help you with, versus just running over the same old script every day. All right, so we do start the tour here. This room used to be the formal parlor of the home. At one point they decided it didn't have enough space in the jail, so they did use it as an interrogation room. They put a doorway here behind the Dillinger display. They sealed that doorway off from the rest of the house. And so yeah, it was an interrogation room. Now the history starts in this place in 1880. William Brown was an architect from Indianapolis, Indiana, and he had done a lot of work building houses, even some state buildings for them. And he wasn't feeling as if he was being challenged enough. So he wanted to come up with something kind of crazy. And he thought of a rotating jail. Now, this was a crazy concept. It was going to be a hard pitch to try to sell. But luckily he came to Crawfordsville, where he met up with 3 of our city commissioners, Jacob, Levi, and Tyree. And they were new to politics. And so the idea of something new and exciting, they wanted to get their name out there. So they jumped on the idea. However, what they didn't know was, 1, they didn't have a patent on the rotating jail, and 2, the architect didn't know enough about steel. So they did a little research and they teamed him up with a man also from Indianapolis. His last name was Hall, Benjamin Hall, and he was your steel guy, if you will. So together the two of them teamed forces And they got the patent approved in 1881, and the construction for this place finished in 1882. So we were up and operating. Sheriff Will Height was our first sheriff, and Joseph Buck Stout was our first inmate who was here on murder charges. So this room now holds our local law enforcement. So there's some sheriff, some police stuff. And then once you're done looking around here, we'll meet in the entryway.
Alrighty, thank you. And you gotta think that's a $10,000 reward in 1934. You have to imagine what that kind of money would be like today. And of course, this is the death mask of John Dillinger.
All right. So as I said, this is the sheriff's residence. So the sheriff would move into this home and they would bring their entire family with them. So we don't actually tour upstairs, but there were 3 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs that the family had entire use of. The pictures here on the wall behind you are just a few of the sheriffs that lived in the home. So each of them, of course, have their own individual history, and we do have stories about some of them. Some of them had small children in the home. Some of them were older and they had grandkids that would visit. We know that the stairwell was notorious for children sliding down it. So we always have fun little stories. This guy, for example, had a son and a daughter, and the son was older, and it happened to be a day they didn't have anyone in the jail. So mom and dad thought they would run on into town to do some shopping, and brother wanted to explore the jail. And so they went back and were snooping around. Well, I think little sister got annoying, and being an older brother, he got tired of it, so he locked her into the jail cell and spun it and rotated it so that she was trapped inside. And then when mom and dad got home, of course, they found her in the jail, and both of them got in trouble for being where they shouldn't have been. So we get a lot of family stories from relatives that come in and visit. So the 3 city commissioners that I mentioned that wanted to make names for themselves are pictured here on this wall. So Jacob has the basket, and then you've got Levi and Tyree. These guys, not only did they want to make a name for themselves, but they wanted this place to really be outstanding. So there's a lot of high-tech stuff we're going to talk about for the 1880s, and these guys are responsible for bringing that here. They gave themselves a budget to build this place of about $18,000, and they really overachieved that budget. They went over by quite a bit, and it ended up being political suicide is what it was. They went too fancy, too crazy, and they even had their names etched in the door out front, so when you go outside and see that name stuff, that was done by them and not as a memorial later. So the townspeople felt like they were showing off too much. The guy on the end in the watercolor is Max Tannenbaum. Max was a lawyer here in Crawfordsville. His family had immigrated this way, and he gets to be our hero. It was in the 1970s that the rumors were that we were building a bigger, safer jail. And someone in town had heard that they were going to tear this place down. And they asked Max legally if there was anything they could do to stop that from happening. and knowing that he was a lawyer, he said, no, I can't legally stop it. However, I can create the Montgomery County Cultural Foundation, which is how we were recognized as a museum in 1975. So we ran and operated as a jail until 1973, and between 1973 to 1975 is when we would have done the remodeling, so the wallpaper and the carpet would have been updated then. You'll also notice the cabinets when we go back to the kitchen area. And then we became a museum in 1975. So we have pretty much had our doors open since 1882, and we ran and operated the jail for 91 years. Stairwell here has hand carvings. The carving is to represent the sheriff's badge. And if you do your research about Indiana, you will learn that the state tree is the popular tulip tree. And this is also the representation of the blossom on that. That's why it has the extra point. All right, I'll go this way. All right, so now we're in the living room. The furniture in this room was donated from the Tannenbaum estate. So it is representative of the 1880s. When I say we were high tech in the 1880s, this is the room I can showcase this. In 1880, electricity had been invented. It had not made its way to Crawfordsville yet. So when they wired this house, if you look at the center here at our chandelier, you'll notice that the left-hand side was wired for gas and the right-hand side was wired for electric. So we did have the first home in Crawfordsville that was set up to handle electricity. Now, if I did my research right, electricity didn't actually get to Crawfordsville until closer to 1886. And when it arrived, it was very faulty. So if a squirrel ran across the power line, it could kick the power off for about a week. Well, the family didn't want to be without power, so they actually ran both gas and electric side by side till closer to the 1900s, and somehow didn't manage to blow themselves up. So that's always impressive.
That is impressive.
That is, right? I have Murphy's Law. It would have blown up. The radio in the room is from at least the 1960s, and it belonged to one of our special deputies, Red Cheney. It's a Motorola, if that means anything to you tech people. The home was heated with coal. We used coal fireplaces in all of the main rooms, and we even used coal boilers to heat the jail when we started. However, we quickly learned that coal boilers was not enough heat, and it is rumored that we had an inmate or two that may have froze to death. So we had to figure out other alternatives in that situation. This room is what I like to call the budget breaking room. It was set up that this room was going to be the dining room and the kitchen combination. As I mentioned, our architect had done houses before, but this was his first experience with something more government, bigger scale, if you will. So he wanted this to be a kitchen and dining room, but the appliances for this place were more of your industrial size, for one, and two, the question came up, who was cooking the meals for the jail? If the matron, which is what your cook would have been, was not the sheriff's wife, you didn't want your service people to share space with the family. So now we had a little bit of a situation. If it was the wife, it still worked out, but because of the appliance size, it would be such a cramped space, they decided at this point to go over the budget and add the kitchen. So we're gonna dart in here real quick. The kitchen, you can tell, was not part of the original design. The ceiling or the roof line, I should say, is a little bit lower. So, and that would have been original 10. It's the only room in the house that has that 10. They built this part knowing that they could lock the door from the rest of the house, so your employees would not have access to the personal belongings of the sheriff and his family. The problem arose then, how do you get food into the jail if this is the kitchen area? So this little room here used to be a pantry, and now it is obviously a restroom. Behind the toilet, you should see a little slot, a little door. That was known as a food pass. So you could prepare the meals, put them on a cart, take them into the pantry, and pass it to the guard. That's how they got the food in there. Now, if the matron was the wife, she did have stairwell access to the main room, so she could come down without waking up the entire household first thing in the morning. Out the back door, you'll see our ramp. At the end of that ramp, approximately, is where the 2 executions that were done in Montgomery County occurred. Just beyond the ramp is a really neat brick building with super cool round windows. That was the solution to our heating problems I mentioned. So that was a steam plant. We burnt coal in it. It took 6 years after the construction of the house, so around 1888, and it was enough heat that it also heated the courthouse as well as our jail. So we had big round billows underneath the road, and it led to the courthouse, which is just a few blocks that way. All right, so we're gonna go back into our dining room. In the case in the dining room, you're going to see a can opener, one of the trays that was later used for food services. The original hand crank, or one of the originals, I should say, and as the children that toured call these the whackers. The cabinet in this room is not actually part of the house. It was original to our courthouse, and it was donated to us from Judge Somers, and it had been painted industrial green through the Depression. Judge Somers' wife is the one who wanted to strip it down and donate it to the museum. So when they donated it to us, it did come as the green piece. 6 men walked it from the courthouse. So they brought just the bottom piece and then came back and got the top piece and brought it over to us. It took Patty only 3 days to strip it down, which is really impressive considering how much artwork is engraved into that. And again, the dishes are part of that Tannenbaum estate. And if you wanted to know what Max's mother looked like, since most of the stuff in here was donated that belonged to her, her image is there on the dining room table. So you have seen the residence. So we're gonna make our way into the jail now. All right, so we're gonna do a couple little history things in here, and I'm gonna point out a few things as well. The food pass door that I pointed out in the pantry would have led right there behind that steel door. And where we started in the formal parlor, the entrance for that door is there behind the barber's chair. So that gives you the layout of the jail. There were 18 rotating jails built in the United States. We are the very first one, of course, with the date of 1882. There are only 2 other jails that can be used as museums. Council Bluffs, Iowa is used, and Gallatin, Missouri are the other 2 museums that we know of. We are the only rotating jail left in existence that can still rotate today, and we will show you that when your tour's wrapping up in this area. If you want to see the list of the other locations for jails, you can find that here. We did have a buyout. We, in 1888, were bought out by the Poly Jail Building Manufacturing Company. They still actually deal with a lot of jails, and we went to catalog sales. So this is the actual catalog where you could purchase your own rotating jail. I believe that because the patent was designed for this specific building, this size, this structure, that once we were built, people wanted to alter their jails. Could we go a little bit bigger? Can we maybe do 3 tiers instead of 2? And then when you added the catalog sales, I think that's kind of what led to the mechanisms failing for several of the locations. So that's probably why we're one of the only ones left. Well, we are the only one left that rotates. All right. So we only needed 2 guards to operate this entire jail. Now the sheriff and his family could access the jail through that door, but no one else was allowed to do that. So if you came to the jail for any other business, you would have been brought in through the Spring Street entrance underneath the neon jail entrance sign that would have been original and outside, of course. Once a person was brought in and their paperwork had been started, they would either use the interrogation room or this area. They would then walk the inmate up to the 3rd floor where the infirmary is. They were given a bath, a clean set of clothes. They could meet with the doctor. They could call in a barber if they needed to, and they were also given 3 hot meals a day. So it was actually pretty luxurious to be here. We had running water and electricity. So this is the 1880s, and most people didn't have flushable toilets, but the jail did. So we were really high tech, as I mentioned earlier. Once all of the paperwork and everything was processed, if you were a woman or a child, you would remain on the 2nd or 3rd floor. There is a women's cell on the 2nd floor, maximum security, and then there are overflow square style cells upstairs on the 3rd floor that we could use for holding. The rotating jail itself is actually 2 levels. So we have the level here and one right above us, and only men were kept in the rotating cylinder. Now, the rotating cylinder is like a double carousel. There are 8 pie-shaped wedged cells on each of the levels, and there was bunk bed in each of those 8 cells. So we could do 16 on this level and 16 above, which is your 32. So we could hold 32 specifically in the rotating part. What the guards would do is they would open up these doors. This one is decorative like a bank safe, if you will, and it could lock. They would get access to the mechanism to rotate. So they would rotate so that they could see an open cell. They would unlock this door, place your inmate into the cell. Because there's a lever here that is counterweight mechanism that caused this door to go open and closed on its track. So you put the inmate in, you close the door, pull the lever, and then you would rotate so that the wall of the cell is blocking the only entrance. Now you are completely sealed into the cell. There is no other doorway in or out, and that is how they proved it to be harder to escape. It also works the same way on the 2nd level, exactly like that. So we are going to walk full circle around, and we will come back through here, and we'll explain some more of it. So watch your step and watch your head. Our inmates, for the most part, were only kept in their jail cells at night. They did get quite a bit of free time during the day. On average, we would have maybe 10 inmates a day. Sometimes at breakfast we might have 10. By lunch, some of them had seen the judge, and then by dinner you may not have any. But on the weekends, of course, we were pretty much maxed out because a lot of people found this to be a good way to spend your weekend. If you worked all week and you wanted to go to the bar and get yourself a little fun time, you could do that. You could be locked up in the jail for the weekend, get your 3 hot meals, see a doctor, have the flushable toilets, like I said, running water, all those nice things that you didn't have at home. Get out nice and early on Monday morning, go right back to work and do it all again next weekend. So we did have several intake because of alcohol related reasons. On average, you could be here anywhere from maybe 10 hours to 24 hours was considered extreme, depending on what you were waiting for. So if you were awaiting trial or something like that, it might be a little longer. All right.
So what you're saying is you guys had a lot of Otises.
Yeah.
Basically, from like the Andy Griffith show, where he just kind of comes in when he's drunk and kind of leaves when he sobers up. So
they had great, they had great food. It was nice and warm, and shoot, we had running water.
And they didn't. Why wouldn't you want to be here? It's like
absolutely.
It's like a hotel almost.
It was luxurious. All right, so you noticed that we walked through the doorway here. This would be opened up in the morning, so you would rotate your inmates out, and they would all come in here, and like I said, maybe 10 on a max. So this room here specifically was used to feed them, so like a cafeteria, if you will. There was a picnic table that was wedged here. The food would be passed through where Danielle's head is over there, and then the guys could do their own dishes and pass the stuff back. This was your original heating grate when it was the coal boiler, however. So you can see that that's very well spaced, and it is rather chilly in here today. If you're looking into the cell, you're going to see one bunk bed here. Right above it is the holes where the 2nd bunk would have been. We got lazy and we mostly used the 1st level. When you guys go up and check out the 2nd and 3rd level, you will see the way the bunks are set up. So these holes here wouldn't have been there. That's where the next bunk in the next cell would have been. The indentation in the back is where your toilet was. It was set up a lot like an outhouse. It was originally wood, and how they flushed the toilets, because I said we had flushable toilets in the 1880s, is we collected rainwater on the roof. We would go to the basement twice a day, pull a lever, and that rainwater would go down. It kind of looks like a water slide or a trough type style setup. It would flush it to the sewer. So we had one of the first sewers here in town as well. So we did have running water and flushable toilets in the cells. And we do know that there was actually lighting that was in the cells because there are rumors that in 1970 when we had a biker gang, some of the guys threw a fit and wanted to kind of not want the bikers down in the same cells with them. So they pulled their lighting and tried to flood their cells to keep, to make their point. They weren't happy. And basically all it ended up being was did you have a good time, clean up your mess, or you don't get breakfast type situation. So it didn't work out for them. But the guys, like I said, they could come in here, they could eat their food, and then the rest of the day they could hang out in what's called the bullpen. So they would then move into this area. You'll notice that the windows are barred inside outside on purpose because they could open those windows for ventilation. The coils were added when the steam plant was added. Otherwise, this was your next grade, and you can see where that's really spaced out. The way it would be rotated, these cells would not have been exposed because the way the wall would have been blocking that doorway. So you wouldn't be sitting here if someone was still in their cell, you wouldn't be poking at them. We had, like I said, access to this area. The guys played cards. They hung out in here, and it was the 1880s. They were allowed to smoke. It wasn't bad for you back then, supposedly. So we had some issues that occurred with our jail, and one of those was safety issues. If you found yourself in our jail cell because of alcohol, which most of them did, these bars are nice and cool. So when you're kind of feeling flushed, you might find yourself leaning up against the bars for comfort or cuddling the bars because you're just hanging on to them. And you may not hear that the guard is getting ready to rotate the jail. This is 30 tons of steel, 60,000 pounds, and it only took about 12 pounds of pressure to make it rotate in the beginning. So once this wall gets moving, it was really moving, and an arm would not stop it. So we did have some amputations and broken arms that occurred from this. One of the other things we had issues with, well, I told you they were allowed to smoke. We had some minor fires here and there. Around 1940 or so, we're told that we had probably a medical transfer. He was probably autistic in today's day and age. And they tried to search him because we are so close to Chicago and Indianapolis. Just like today, we really don't know what to do with our mentally handicapped, unfortunately. They didn't back then either, so they would transfer them from jail to medical facility. And so this person had been brought to us. The guards tried to search him, and it just wasn't happening. He wasn't okay with that. So they put him up on the second floor in maximum security. However, he had a book of matches with him, and he was able to light his mattress on fire. The floor and the stairwell was wood, and the fire spread. It trapped him. He did perish in the fire. The guys that were in the jail were able to be rotated out. There weren't that many that day, and they were okay, but the government got involved, and they said that we were no longer safe. So how were we going to accommodate this, and how were we going to fix this so that we could still operate? Well, the government came in, and they cut 8 individual cell doors. So now each wedge had a cell door, its own personal door. Like a regular jail, you would now walk people in and lock them in individually. So they did do the cutting of the 8 individual cells upstairs and down, and they added the metal catwalk, which is above your head. The catwalk was finished around 1941, and we were instructed that we were not to rotate the jail anymore. So they welded the outer cage to the ground so that just your interior floor and wall would rotate, before the cage and the wall would rotate like gears in a clock. So that was how we were supposed to be safer. Now, when we became a museum in the 1970s, when we did the remodel, we had the original bars, and we did weld them back into place, and that's why you will see these weld marks in here. They had metal toilets at one point. There is one there behind you and a picture of how it was set up. We have graffiti throughout the entire place. If you've missed it, we do have pictures of it here and there. And then the picnic table picture, just to kind of show you how that picnic table fit. You know, if you had, you know, less than 10 people, you could easily feed everybody at the same time in the jail. If you haven't found graffiti and you're just looking for it all over, you are actually right there by Joe. Joe came to visit us on a day where there was concrete repair. So we always tell people Joe says hi. And then we did upgrade to porcelain toilets, thankfully. On a cold day today, I don't think it would make much difference. So this room was set up that they were going to use it to feed as well, thinking that maybe their upper level people would be brought down here. But what they quickly realized is, since alcohol was such a big reason people were brought into us, if the room was already spinning, putting them in a jail cell and spinning them more just didn't make as much sense as it needed. It made more work for the guards, if you will. So they did use this area as a drunk tank for a while, and they also used it for visitation. So if your lawyer or mama came to check on you, they could talk to you through this. All right. And then our Crime and Punishment Board shows an estimate of fees, how long people were here. Assault and battery is technically slightly higher than alcohol, but most assault and battery occurred because of that liquid courage. So we always say alcohol is the #1 reason. Women in the beginning did have harsher punishments. We do know that the longest we kept a woman in our jail was for 2 weeks, and it was because she rode her bicycle on the sidewalk. Rumors are she probably mouthed at her arresting officer, and he made an example of her and kept her. All right. So we have made our way full circle. And we're going to need to push this open. I am going to rotate the jail cell for you now. And when it is rotating, the second floor is rotating at the same time, like I said, like a double carousel. It may be at the hard part because we didn't switch it around after the 1940s for a little while. It did stay stationary. It had taken on some weight. So there is a part where it's a little rougher to get it going, and then there's a part where it's really easy, and I never know which way we left off when someone else used it before me. So if it's at the rough part, it will wind me, and that's bad because I like to talk. So after I stop the rotation, I will have you guys go ahead and explore the second and third floor. Everything is labeled up there by yourselves. I am going to rotate it long enough that you guys can get a good view of it here, and then as you're heading up, you can still see it rotate. So once you hit about there, I will stop the rotation. When you're done exploring upstairs, we will meet you over here and talk about the executions if you'd like to hear about that. Once that part is done, the final part is we're going to go to the basement and see the belly of the beast, if you will. When we do that, normally I'm here by myself, so you don't always get to see it, but because Danielle came along today, she's going to escort you guys to the basement, and while she does that, I will rotate it again so you can see it from the underside, and then I'll join you guys down there. All right, so we're going to get this ready for you. As I said, this is 30 tons of steel, 60,000 pounds, and it did take originally 12 pounds of pressure to get it going. And you guys can start heading up anytime you want.
Jail that still rotates in here. The only one in existence. So this would be your maximum security.
The body.
You can see your potty and your
bugs.
wash area.
Yes, bugs. Bugs. The plastic. Don't get your bugs.
So now this is the woman's cell. And you see she got a sink and a toilet and a bed.
Yes.
Another bed for a roomie. And this would be the infirmary. And this would be the third floor.
They would have been more cautious and document a little more as to what they were doing. But some of these people were just coming in to clear out stuff and you know, iron and steel sell pretty well still for repurposes. So we're not quite sure why they did that. Like if you notice there was like a couple of doors up there too, and we're always asked what's behind the doors. It would have been like storage closets, you know, your linens would have been kept up there and stuff like that. But we don't know all the details because unfortunately they just weren't great at keeping records. And then of course so many fires and stuff, things are hard to...
I also wonder who made the official design upstairs, because at the end of the day, if you think about it, it's actually a waste of space. Like there's several places where you could have, you know, had like another cell or something very similar. You know what I mean? It might have been a little smaller.
Well, then, like I said, our original architect was Mr. Brown, William Brown, and he was used to doing houses. So this was his first attempt ever at doing anything of this nature. Now he did, if you notice on the list, he quit designing. Like once this one was done, his name remained on the patent, but other than that, he was gone. Like he just quit. Other people started designing their spaces, and then the Hall Hall and I believe it was Hall Ketchum is what their full name was. They continued to be on the patents for quite a while. So they continued to grow and change with every other jail that was built. But like I said, our designer, he wanted to just see what he could do, and then he did it, and he was done, and he went back to doing government buildings and stuff like that. So it was their first run. They were just let's see what weirdness we can come up with, I guess.
They did a great job.
Yeah. All right. So the execution information. There were 2 executions that were done here in Montgomery County. We actually had 4 hangings, however. How does that work? So in 1885, there was a family by the name of the McMullins. They were considered to be pretty classy family, made pretty good money. They were farmers, I believe cattle farmers, in fact. They had been found in the burning remains of their home, and they had been murdered. And it was rumored that James Dennis and John Coffey were the accusers. They were the ones that they thought were pretty guilty of the murders. Now, the trial for these 2 was set that they would go together before the judge. Conveniently, Mr. Dennis ended up very sick, and he could not attend the trial. And and Mr. Coffey went before the judge. Now, Coffey's story had changed 3 times, and the judge had pretty much had enough of his story being flopped around so much that he did decide that Mr. Coffey was guilty for his part of the murders. And he was set to be executed here in Montgomery County. The issue, however, is a lot of people here in town do not feel that Mr. Coffey was guilty at all. It's rumored that our guards also did not feel this man was guilty, and that they kind of had a soft spot for this guy. Needless to say, we still had a job to do because the judge said, so you do what the judge says. The night before the actual execution was to take place, we tested the gallows. We had never done an execution before. So Alexander Harper, who was our sheriff, and the guards went out and they took 40-pound sandbags and they tested numerous times throughout the evening. In fact, it's rumored they rotated the jail so that both Coffey and Dennis could see them practicing. Coffey, of course, knowing that this was his fate he was looking at, was very distraught. It's rumored that the guards laid on the jail cell floor that night to comfort him. He was so distraught in the morning he couldn't eat, and he was given a high dose of morphine and then led out to the execution gallows. They strung him up and the rope broke. The rope broke because they had over-tested it, or overstretched it, if you will, so much the night before. They readjusted the rope itself, restrung him up, and it snapped a second time. We actually made the New York Times. The rope broke twice. They called for a third and, well, basically attempt with a brand new rope. This time, the rope wasn't tight enough. You have to kind of pre-stretch a rope to get a decent knot on it. And so the execution should have taken 3 minutes. It actually took 12 minutes before they were able to cut him down. As I said, rumors were Coffey wasn't even guilty, so this was a horrible event. They did sell tickets to this event. There were about 250 spectators that had viewed this. They had bought tickets and viewed this. And the town received a lot of heck, as you can imagine. They were made fun of like they would be in tabloids today. The sheriff was made fun of. They received a lot of just comments, and it was just almost unbearable. So that Crawfordsville actually asked that we not do any more executions. Not only did the sheriff get made fun of, the judge got a lot of pressure from this. So the judge decided that this crime had been paid for and Dennis was let go. So basically, people still believe that he got away with murder while Coffey was an innocent man. Now, a little side note fun thing. At one point, our curator from this museum was invited to meet with Stephen King. So if you've heard the Coffey name, you might know the Green Mile. It wasn't enough that we were given any rights for anything, but we were invited to meet with Stephen King. So we know that there was just a tiny bit of truth in the name use.
So my question, I guess, would be this: what was the evidence pointing towards the man who was let go, and not towards the man?
Well,
I mean, basically, what was the evidence each way?
Dennis was an employee of the McMullins, and he had been seen when the cattle had sold. Mr. McMullen was buying new boots, and they went to the store. So witnesses had seen that Dennis had asked Mr. McMullen, hey, can I have your boots, since these are actually good shape boots and you're buying new ones? They didn't fit Dennis. And he said, well, I'll just buy my own with the money that you're going to give me because I've been your ranch hand all this time. And Mr. McMullen's like, yeah, about that. Your wife has been ill, so you haven't really been working as much. So your pay's probably not going to be as high as you thought it was going to be. And there was an argument that entailed at that point. So it's believed that Dennis then found Coffey, who was supposedly of simple mind. He found Coffey, and it was like a wrong place, wrong type of timing situation. And now Coffey was found in stockings that belonged to the McMullen family and had actually had like a penny or something on him that they believe he had got from the McMullen family. So what we believe happened is Dennis found him, said, hey, come help me clean up this barn and get it ready for the next shipment of cows that are getting ready to come in. And the McMullen people, being nice that they were, probably offered Coffey to stay and have dinner because they fed their help. And so both men were there. It's known that they were both there. But because Coffey was of simple mind, when they questioned him, he panicked. His stories just weren't adding up. I mean, there's always two sides to every story. There's also research that says Coffey was really intelligent and probably was guilty, and he just convinced everybody he wasn't. It just varies on how you read it. But there was connections to both guys. And we do know that Dennis's wife was in a mental asylum. And when he was let go, he did take her out of the mental asylum. So we do know that he did miss a lot of work. So as I mentioned though, we did a request that we not have to do any more executions. Now at the beginning of the tour, I mentioned that we had our first inmate, Joseph Stout, that was here. Buck was his nickname. Buck was here on murder charges. We did not execute Buck, as you can tell, because this was our first execution. 6 months after this, though, we were told there was another guy by the name of John Henning who was from the Rockville area. For us local Indiana people, that's where our covered bridge festivals are. They had taken Buck for us and done the execution there. And since they had John Henning in their facility, he was being threatened by lynch mobs. So they wanted us to take him and do his execution here, like a trade-off, if you will, for Buck, basically. Now, John's situation was a lot different. There was a lot of evidence, and he never did deny that he wasn't guilty of his crime. Now, he had a kind of love triangle. He had a fiance named Charlotte. He called her Lottie. And Lottie ran a bed and breakfast, we think. But there were a lot of women that were in the house. And she had called off her engagement to this guy.
Possibly a house of ill repute.
Possibly.
Speculation.
Speculations, we don't know. It was a long time ago. But she'd called off her engagement, and Henning had been seen around town purchasing bullets. He had threatened to kill her. He was very angry. He had approached the house, and there was another woman with Lottie. And he said, I want to talk to Lottie. And the woman said, I don't think I'm going to leave you two alone. And he said, fine, have it your way. Pulls out a gun and starts to fire at both women. Lottie was shot in the back and did die from her injuries. The other woman had a wrist injury and was able to testify. So she, of course, pointed him out as the murderer. Now, because he was transferring, they brought him here for safety from the lynch mobs, as I said. He loved the limelight. He never denied that he didn't kill Lottie, but he says, oh, good old Sam Good had gotten involved, and if he hadn't been involved, things wouldn't have had to escalate the way they did. There's no real proof of any research on anything about Sam. We're not exactly sure. But he, like I said, he would write the paper, and you can actually Google some of his articles. He was hard to kind of read sometimes. It was pretty broken English and stuff. It was pretty funny too. But he loved to tell his story. So when his execution was getting ready to happen, he ate a large breakfast. He was led out to the gallows, and he was high-fiving people, shaking hands. He told his story again because, like I said, he didn't hide from his story. He embraced it. His execution went off without a hitch, if you will, and so we did get granted the permission not to do any more executions. So this piece is the actual eye that both men would have hung from. And like I said, both actual executions did have tickets. Now, Alexander Harper, which was the sheriff, had a little bit of a sense of humor, and instead of just selling tickets to the second execution, he used that to get back at people who had made fun of him for messing up the Coffey execution. If you didn't receive a handwritten invitation, you couldn't buy a ticket to his next execution. It was his way of kind of rubbing their noses back in it. And there were about 300 to 350 tickets of Hennings that were sold, and you can actually see the replica of the ticket there. And the picture right above that, we always try to end it on a positive note, is one of our local legends. That's Elizabeth Scholl. Elizabeth was married to Robert Scholl. Robert Scholl was sheriff from 1970 to 1974. They were the last family that lived here in the house. Now, Elizabeth started off as the matron, and in 1971, she did file for a divorce from Robert. And the town thought that he would get to keep the house, since this was purpose of the job, and that she would be asked to move. However, if you notice her uniform in that picture, it doesn't quite look like a matron's uniform. She was actually given permission to stay in the house and was actually made a deputy sheriff and given her own matron. So she kind of got to do a little more, and she's got a whole lot of history with the town and all that she did. She actually helped with some police chase type stuff. And yeah, she's pretty cool, and she's still around, so we still get a lot of our stories from Elizabeth. And her uniform would have been in the front. All right, so I'm going to send you guys with Danielle. She's going to head you down to the basement, and I'm going to give the jail a little bit of a rotation. I'm going to greet those people, and I'll be right down with you guys.
Alrighty.
Danny, you get down there and holler when you're ready.
Okay.
Alright.
Alright, so if you look this way diagonally, you can see that first gear, which is where that hand crank is connected, just under that doorway. And then it comes into here, connects, and as you saw, the entire floor of the jail is your final gear. So if you look up into the system, you can kind of see that trough or water slide I tried to explain with the plumbing. They would have pulled the lever right about here. The water would have whooshed down to the sewer. These support beams on the outer side were added when we were a museum because you can see around the edge where water damage had started to separate the jail a little bit. When the steam plant was brought in, it connected from this wall, that's why it's messed up, and it would have connected right here into the base. So your plumbing and your heating line were kept separate. And you can see that's all right up in here and down. And then of course our guy here flushing the system or getting ready to. When we started off, as I mentioned, we did attempt coal boilers. Those concrete walls there would have been where the coal was kept. We didn't use it for very long, so it's not super black, of course. You can notice that the windows are barred, and so was the doorway that Danielle led you through. So we did have a couple people who thought they'd be smart and try to escape our jail. The back of the toilets, those round areas, were originally wood. They broke through, found themselves standing on that pinwheel, shimmied down this pole, and were not able to escape. So even though they successfully left their cell, they weren't able to leave the building. I believe there was a magician maybe 10 years ago that videoed an escape, but as you can tell, there are exit doors throughout the area. Who knows? And the only other person we know of was a man who was brought in for questioning. He had not actually been booked into the jail, but when he did his questioning, he was up in the infirmary and he escaped out the infirmary because there were no bars on the 3rd level. So he had roped his way with bed sheets and escaped. But he was not really fully even locked up, so he wasn't technically an inmate.
So that's the only really technical, I guess, escape that they've had. Right,
and like his family member did a lot of DNA search to find him, and he used several aliases and actually ended up doing bounty type work and law enforcement type work. But it was never proven that he was even really guilty of his charges to be locked up anyway. They were just questioning him. So if you want to count him as an escapee when he wasn't really forced to be in jail to begin with, I mean, I don't know how you want to play that coin really. It's just a matter of which side you want to flip it on, I guess. There is a doorway, and just watch this last step. Even the basement was kept separate from family and staff. So the staff would have used this doorway here to enter the jail to come down and flush. And the closet that's super messy right across from that would have been where the bodies were kept while we were waiting for the coroner to come. So when we did our executions, the ramp was right out that door. They would have brought them in and kept the bodies there. And then the family used the rest of these rooms for storage, ping pong tournaments, washer and dryer, and all that fun stuff. we are the only museum in Crawfordsville that isn't city funded, so we do our own fundraisers. So we have haunted jail, escape rooms, arts and crafts, art camp, ceramics and stuff to help keep our doors open. So that's why you're seeing all these little signs as you're walking through. So you've been all the way through, and if you don't have any questions, that's it.
And this is the current Crawfordsville Police Department. Well, that's going to do it for us here today in front of the Montgomery County Rotary Jail Museum. We hope you enjoyed this vlog. We enjoy bringing it to you.
You can join us on all of our social media websites, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, at The Top Vloggers. You can also support us if you would like to by going to www.patreon.com/thetopvloggers.
And I think that's going to do it for us here today. Until next time, we'll see you next week. Top Vloggers
Out.